All right, so we're going to pick up reading on page 95. I have never ever liked anybody who went to Warwick High for the arts. They were all working too hard at being different. But Warwick was in our division, and they could always get somebody on the court who could play ball. They had one skinny white dude who could shoot the eyes out of the basket. Ruffy said it was the same guy every year. They keep him down in the basement. One year they'll throw a few freckles on him, and the next year they'll change the color of his hair or mess with his eyebrows, but it's the same dude. The way to stop dudes like that was to muscle them. Go to the man-to-man on offense, back them into the paint and score underneath, then just beat them to death on defense. Don't let them play their game, or they would weird out the game and leave you looking stupid. We had already lost to FDA, and Warwick was not supposed to be a powerhouse. A loss to them would put the whole regular season in retard gear. We got to Warwick, and they had their freaky looking cheerleaders, four white girls, two sisters, and an Asian girl, out front waiting for our bus. They all had red hair, dark makeup that was 2 seconds from goth, and about a yard of attitude. What they had different this year was this big cornbread brother at center. We warmed up, and I tried to be cool, but I could feel myself getting worked up. House never wanted us to look at the team we were going to play, but all of us kept sneaking looks over at Warwick and the new guy everybody was talking about at center. He looked strong, black, and ready. Dude had the longest arms I had ever seen on a human being. He's listed at 6'11", Colin said. I think he's 7 feet easy. Abdul said he's played against him in Marcus Garvey Park. He's strong, Abdul said. Plus, he's funky smelling. I don't think the guy ever watches. You got any moves? I asked. Nothing, but when he backed into me, his butt was in my chest, Abdul said. That's a funny feeling, man. Some dude is bent over and backing his butt into your chest? The 1 minute buzzer went off, and House called us together. This is a slow team, he said. They rely on rebounding and set plays. We're going to have to box out the boards big time and make our plays on offense. We can't win a shootout with these guys unless we out rebound them. And this guy Tyrone Scott at center. I don't think that's going to happen. Ruffy, you have to do your best to keep him off the boards. Tomas and Sky need to help out when they can. Colin and Ricky need to stay on top of their guards. Anybody coming off the bench needs to remember we're trying to play team ball. Okay, put your hands together. I put my hand out, but the set was stinking up the place. I wasn't starting. Ruffy came over to me and put his arm around me. Hey, you ain't starting. I ain't playing, he said. No, don't let me take our game, I said. You go on and start. Give me some time to think it through. Whatever you say and whenever you say it, I got your back, Drew. Me and Ruffy slapped hands. He turned to go out to the center of the court. I felt like pure D crap. I didn't think any of the regular team wanted to see me sitting, but I wasn't sure. Fletch sat next to me on the bench. How deep is your game? He asked. It's deep enough to. I turned to answer him, and he held his hand up. Why, you ask? Just something you need to be thinking about, he said. I'm glad to see you keeping your cool. If somebody is trying to take something from you because it makes them feel good to play with your head, the best answer is to smile. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know what he meant, and I wasn't keeping my cool. I could feel the tears coming, or wanting to come, and nothing Fletch said would change that. Plus, I was thinking about what House had said in Tacky's, and wondering if Fletch was playing mind games with me. The game started with the jump ball. Ruffy couldn't get up anywhere near Scott, and they controlled the tape. I knew the brother bringing the ball down, Marcus Webb. He was tough but short. He brought the ball down, and all the time Ruffy was fighting in the center. Their big man was doing a swim movement on Ruffy, using his arms to get in front of him while using his feet to back him in. The way he moved with his legs apart and slow, I figured he was going to be the kind of player who parked in the lane and stayed there all day, unless the refs came up with some 3-second violations. Ruffy was trying to keep him out, but Scott backed in deep when the ball came in, and he could just turn and muscle up a deuce. Colin brought the ball down for us, and House was already calling out a play from the sidelines. I thought that was lame because the team hadn't even gotten the flow yet. Sky and Tomas tried to switch pick, and Scott ran into it. But Sky was boxed in, and Colin threw the ball away. Warwick came down again, and Marcus brought it inside fast to Scott, who whipped it out in the white guard, number 14. I swear that fool was going up even before it reached his hands. He went straight up, brought the right elbow into a perfect line with the hoop, and let it go in a beautiful arch. Ricky watched it as he boxed him out, but he didn't need to because that ball didn't touch anything but net. Ruffy looked over at me. We both knew that number 14 was their shooter. Colin brought the ball down again and passed it into Ruffy. Ruffy tried to hook and Scott slapped it away. Ricky got the loose ball, put a move on number 14, and went around him. Scott stepped out, and when Ricky went for the dunk, Scott had both hands on the ball. The home crowd started screaming as Scott wagged his finger at Ricky. The whole first quarter was the Scott show, with his knocking away our shots and snatching bounds with one hand. But it was their number 14 who hit 3 threes and a layup to lift them to 29 first quarter lead. House put in Ernie Alvarez for Ricky. I knew it wasn't going to make a difference. We were still running set ball plays, and the guys looked like they didn't know what they were doing. During the second quarter, Ruffy was forcing Scott further and further out. It was strength against strength, and Ruffy was out muscling their big man. When Scott started complaining to the ref that he was being pushed, I figured we had a chance. But number 14 hit 3 more threes, and at the half, they had us 37-22. 15 points was hard to overcome against anybody, but I was really hard against a big man who had picked up only 2 fouls in the first half. They had a scoreboard with all the players listed. I saw that Tomas had scored 2 points. On the way to the locker room, Fletch touched my arm. I asked him how come he still wasn't playing. House thought it was going to be an easy game, that Scott didn't do anything against Bryant, Fletch said. We lose this game, you might lose your season. Yo, man, you sound like you're putting it on me, I said. Does it sound that way? Fletch asked. Fletch walked away and just felt like all of a sudden I was carrying a truck on my back. I felt so tired. It was like my whole life was spinning around me and I wasn't digging any of it. We're not playing sharp ball out here, House said. We're leaving the perimeter open for the three, and we're not getting enough offensive rebounds. Hey, coach, we're not leaving that dude open, Ricky spoke up. He gets the ball off so fast you can't get it. He knows he's going to shoot when he's getting to a spot. He's not setting up. He's just all touch and burn. He's getting too many open shots, House said. I can count them, and I can see when they're coming up. You're out there on the floor. You should see it too. I was down as we warmed up for the second half, but then Fletch came over and told me I was going to start. How come? Why do you care? He asked. You don't want to play? Yeah, I want to play, I said. What do you mean if we lose today, my season might be lost? You can't lose more than 2 games and hope to get into the playoffs, Fletcher said. And we haven't played against Boogie yet, not in a real game. I wanted to say something about what House had run down in the restaurant, about how my game wasn't going to make it for me, but at the same time I didn't. It was like saying that your mind was someplace else because your old lady was messing around and didn't love you anymore. I wanted to believe my game, no matter what anybody else said or what doubts I had. I was excited to walk out on the court. Number 14 was kneeling, pulling up his socks when I got to him. Hey, white boy, I'm going to eat you up this half. Hey, black boy, he said, standing. How come I'm the one with the knife and fork and you didn't even start the game? Yeah, right. I was ready. The ball went up and Scott slapped it toward their backcourt. But Ricky, who was starting with me, cut across and picked it off. I took off for the hoop and Ricky let the pass go just right. The ball bounced ahead of me just inside the foul line, and I got it on the rise and went up for my first dose of the game. The whole team came alive. We dogged Warwick into mistakes, and our fast break was kicking strong. In 2 minutes, we had scored 7 baskets to their one, and we were trailing by 3 when they copped a timeout. Let's keep the ball under control, House said. They're probably going to stay in a man-to-man defense, so we can work our inside plays deep. Drew, don't get wild on me. I looked away from House. He was still trying to get back to his weak plan. He made some more noises about us needing to be on the alert for transitions. That's what we had been all about when we were on the court, and he knew it. Fast breaks don't come out of thin air. Warwick came out in a more settled way, slowing the game down. I knew they were still watching the scoreboard, figuring to nurse their little lead. They backed Scott into Ruffy with their big man yelling at the refs that Ruffy was fouling. Refs don't like that, so they called a 3-second violation against him. Ricky brought the ball down, and I saw that they had switched to a 2-2-1 zone, daring us to go inside against Scott. I took up the challenge. Ricky picked 14 for me at the top of the key, which wasn't a big deal because he wasn't playing any real D. Their forward came over late, and I went by him right at Scott. Scott was big with long arms, but he must have been playing against chumps because when I got to him, he was standing straight up. No way he was going to have any leap, and I knew it as I took off over him. When I came down, he was looking up at the basket. Their fans were oohing and eyeing, and I was feeling good. If I had been in the playground, I would have been talking, but I didn't want to say anything and draw a technical. Ricky was getting the ball around, and at the end of the third quarter, we were up by 6, and it looked like it was time for cruise control. They had the ball at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and number 14 brought it down slow. Ruffy was killing Scott in the pivot, and Tomas and Sky were rebounding tough. I went out toward 14 to stop the ball and saw him dip his knees and chip for a shot. He was fast on the gun, but I was faster in the air. But what he did was a high crossover and a quick step around me. Twisting in the air, I reached for him and tried to get my first step going before I came down. I got my foot on the ground a half step behind 14 and was trying to plant my back foot when he cut across my path, making me stop so I couldn't foul him, then brought the ball between his legs back outside. When I turned, I was off balance and stumbling, and he was going up for a shot. I didn't even have to look to know he wasn't going to be touching anything but net. The dude had turned me completely around and almost had me on the floor. That got their team going, and they staged a comeback with 14 leading the way. But we were holding on and playing well. Tomas could work his man inside. He was playing against his brother, who was deep into his game, moving and throwing elbows. He could get up high, but Tomas was controlling his space around the boards and coming up with shares of rebounds. He was hesitating on offense, but was getting the ball out to me and Ricky. I got this feeling that I was right where I wanted to be in the world, on the court, playing in a tough game, just as good as I needed to be. What was going to happen, who was going to win or lose, depended on who had the most heart, the most game. There were no numbers to worry about, no books to read, just me and what I knew, the court, the hoop, the sound of the ball on the floor. Yo-Yo Drew, the refs had called a timeout and Ricky had my arm. That white guy ain't got nothing but an outside shot. He's not going inside. He doesn't have anything but that one shot and the moves to get open. But he's kicking my butt with it, I said. You want to hold him? No, man, Ricky smiled. I don't like holding white guys. We were playing strong and together, and they were relying on two men, number 14 and Scott. Ruffy had taken Scott out of their offense, but he was still kicking in on defense and keeping the score close. The traffic at the top of the key was brutal. They were running me into picks like they had a schedule. If I had to run into a school bus, I wouldn't have been surprised. Ruffy was calling them from the center at first. Then it got to be so many it was funny. Pick left, they're doubling, slide, go through. The game got down to 30 seconds and they had the ball. We were up by 2 and 14 was bringing the ball down again. I wanted to foul him, give him the 2 for the foul line, right away and then go for the win. But we didn't have any timeouts left, so I couldn't do it. I knew 14 was happy to have the ball. He looked confident, even though his team was a deuce down. I was hoping he would bring the ball into Scott, because if he did, Ruffy was going to clobber the big man and put him on the foul line. I stopped the ball 5 feet from the 3-point line. The moment I stepped up, 14 turned his back to me, faked left, hooked me hard with his right elbow, and took a step around me. It was like the whole thing was in slow motion. As I turned, I felt how low he was and how close, and felt myself stopping so I wouldn't trip over him. As soon as I stopped, going up on the balls of my feet, I knew the rest of the program. He spun around me and turned to see his elbow go up past my eyes. The only thing I could hope for was that he'd miss the tray. He didn't. They were up by a point. Number 14 had pulled the same move on me twice, and I felt like crap as I glanced up at the clock. 11 seconds. Ricky brought the ball down quickly. I didn't want to look at the clock, but my eyes went up anyway. 6 seconds. Not enough time to set anything up. Ricky made a move toward the basket, had a chance for a short jumper, then passed the ball to me. Number 14 went for a head fake. I was past him. I took a quick step across the lane, saw Sky pick his forward, and went up as hard as I could. All I saw was the big black shadow going up in the air between me and the hoop. I looked up to see if I could dunk, but I could have had to slam the ball through Scott's chest. His hands were a foot over the rim, and the dude was still rising. I brought the ball back down and turned as I pulled it through my back, hoping that Tomas would be somewhere in the area. I landed on my heels and fell hard on my back as I bounced on one of the mats they had around the edge of the floor. I heard the buzzer. Time was out. Looked up and saw our guys jumping up and down. Something good must have happened. Guys helped me up, and I was looking at the scoreboard. Our score was flashing. We had won by a point. I was hoping you were sliding over, I shouted to Tomas over the noise. I wasn't, Tomas said. Their guys just pushed me away from him, and the ball came to me. In the locker room, we were shouting and giving each other high fives. House was talking about how the backdoor play had worked at the end and how he was glad we remembered it. The whole team felt good after the win, and it showed. We were slapping each other on the back and making stupid jokes and laughing, even though they weren't funny. House joined in, and so did Fletch. You know we're a good team, Tomas said to me and Ruffy as we walked down the street. I thought we could be. Now I know it's true. Ruffy laughed and said it hadn't been for his 9 points we would have lost. Then he had to grab a cab and get home in a hurry. Me and Tomas kept talking as we walked, going over the game, enjoying ourselves. Harlem is good when the temperature drops. The lazy rhythms of summer perk up, and the street life seems to take on a sense of purpose. The cold weather hustle is meaner. You can't be sleeping in the park when the hawk nipping at your butt and the same Mr. Hungry who was kidding with you in July grows teeth when the weather turns cold. Tomas said, I'm going to make myself some soup, and then I'm going to watch television. But the whole time I'm watching, I'm going to be thinking about the game. Why don't you come to my house for supper? I said. Sure, why not? Tomas nodded as he spoke. What time should I come? 6:30, I said, trying to remember what time we usually had supper. I hadn't thought about inviting Tomas to dinner, but I didn't think my mom would mind. Ruffy was always dropping by, and she always put on a plate for him. When Tomas turned to go to his crib, I stopped him and asked if his mother was going to come by too, just so I could let my mother know. No, she's working downtown tonight, he said. Okay, I'm going to stop there.